We're doing a public service,
So
you and I together.
So basically, you're going to put on your platform over the next 2 or 3 years
Hey, listen.
every mad idea as a public service.
Now
so that
you're
people
being
can-
daft.
I mean,
Now you're being daft and mad.
It's ridiculous. No, I'm just
You're
showing,
being ridiculous.
No, I'm showing you the ridiculousness of your
maybe
position.
maybe people learn lessons and make progress, and we discuss things. And you know, at conferences, mad things get discussed on fringe events. We've seen plenty of mad things at Labour conferences that you've attended, Mr. Balls.
Look, can I ask about Lucy Connelly?
Richard Tice brutally humiliates Ed Balls in an explosive free speech debate, and you should care because bad claims can endanger lives and shred trust. But here's the twist: it's hard to believe because the transcript hints this argument widens fast. Balls labels misinformation deeply irresponsible, warning rumours about the King's cancer could stop vaccines and leave children dying from measles. Tice shoots back that Balls has a bigger platform on the show, then mocks him as mad and ridiculous, talking about the next 2 or 3 years. Not your usual studio sparring, either. Who pays when words go unchecked, and politicians treat it as sport? Watch this exchange closely, because it's not a gotcha edit, it's a live line of questioning where the answers get slippery fast. Pay attention to the wording on the House and the tax point.
In Clacton.
They've bought a house.
Well, at the end of the day, Nigel is the MP for Clacton.
But doesn't own a house there, you just told us.
Look, his partner's bought a house in Clacton. Those arrangements are for them. His constituents want to know, is he in the constituency? Is he looking after them and doing a great job? To which the answer is yes.
But you know
yes.
what the tax issue is here, don't you?
Yeah. Anybody who buys a house, you pay the appropriate level of stamp duty.
But what
you
is the
take
tax
advice,
issue?
You take the advice. He will have taken.
Do you know what the tax issue is? Which is why we're
I'm not
asking.
his tax expert.
No,
I'm not his tax advisor.
But the policy issue here. Do you understand the policy issue we're raising? If he bought it or his partner bought it, I mean, do you know why we're asking this?
Yes, I understand that the appropriate level of tax has to be paid by the appropriate person.
And if he bought the house, would the appropriate level of tax be higher or lower than if his partner bought the house?
I think it's very clear and simple. His partner bought the house. That is what he is confirmed.
And if
occasionally, when you're giving an interview, you talk in a roundabout way.
If his partner bought the house, the tax would be lower.
You don't get it exactly word perfect.
If the partner bought the house, would the tax be lower because it's her first home? If he bought the house, he had other homes, it would be a higher level of tax. He said he'd bought the house.
I'm not a tax expert. I don't know the details.
You're not.
You're asking the wrong guy.
Richard Tice, we are all experts on stamp duty as a result
Are you?
of all the questions.
After 2 weeks of discussing Angela Rayner, we know all about
Rayner's
it.
tax. I mean, this is the whole point. People want to know if this is Nigel Farage.
Has
let
the
me ask the
appropriate amount
question.
of tax been paid? And to which the answer is, I'm 100% sure, certainly.
OK, but people want to know why, then, Nigel Farage said that he'd bought a house in Clacton. Because the people of Clacton want to know...
He didn't buy it.
He
didn't buy it. His partner bought it.
Nigel and I give dozens of interviews every week.
And
We're
every
speaking
single
all the
one
time.
will be scrutinised.
And occasionally, of course, you may be busy, you may be thinking. Sometimes you describe I or we. You know, it's part of the process.
Richard, his partner bought the house, not Nigel,
Yeah,
to
he's clarified that.
to get a lower stamp duty, right? And that's tax avoidance.
That's your assumption. That's nothing. I've no idea.
No, but
I don't discuss
it may be
personal
legitimate.
business affairs.
It may be. Well, we've been discussing Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister.
She's the Deputy Prime Minister who spent her years in opposition calling Tory ministers to resign consistently over the slightest transgression, and they came to power saying that they were going to be a model of integrity and perfection.
You would hopefully also say that if you came to power, you would be the absolute model of integrity, especially on things like tax.
Absolutely, but occasionally people will misspeak when they're in the middle of an interview and you get the odd pronoun or whatever.
But that's
wrong.
not the slightest transgression. That's an even slighter transgression than the slightest transgression.
Right, so what you've just heard is the basic pattern, the simple yes or no public trust question, and then a fog of my understanding, appropriate tax, and I'm not the expert. According to the transcript, Ed Balls pushes on whether Nigel Farage said I've bought a house when, in the same breath, they're now saying his partner bought it, and whether that could mean lower stamp duty. Normal people care because this isn't gossip, it's the stuff that decides whether politicians are playing by the same rules as everyone else. Now, let me put the whole situation in primary school English. Richard Tice is a senior Reform UK figure. He goes on TV to defend Nigel Farage and the party. Ed Balls presses him on two big issues, money and trust, and speech and responsibility. First, it's the question of who bought a property, what was said publicly about it, and whether the tax bill changes depending on whose name it's in. Second, it's Reform's free speech pitch, where the argument becomes, do you defend people saying mad, harmful things, or do you draw a line when it risks real-world damage? Strip away the theatre, and it's about honesty, fairness, and whether powerful people get special treatment. And here's what jumps out. Tice doesn't just say, here are the facts, here are the documents, job done. He leans on certainty without detail, I'm 100% sure, while also saying, effectively, don't ask me, I'm not the tax bloke. That's a convenient combo, isn't it? Confidence on the conclusion, vagueness on the workings. From an America First point of view, you've seen this movie before. The establishment class, and yes, that includes the media class, loves complicated language when it protects their mates, and loves simple language when it's time to bash ordinary people. If you miss a bill, you get chased. If you make a paperwork mistake, you get the book thrown at you. Yet when it's the politically connected, suddenly it's all pronouns in interviews and roundabout ways of speaking. Now we pivot to the bit that really matters culturally, the free speech row. Because this is where Ed Balls tries to frame it as free speech versus misinformation, and Tice tries to frame it as free speech versus authoritarian control. Listen for the moment where Ed says he's flabbergasted, and Tice snaps back with that blunt line about agreeing with speech as long as you like the message.
But you're absolutely sure that the appropriate amount of tax has been paid.
The suggestion otherwise, frankly, is just wrong.
OK. And it does not matter that the MP for Clacton is not the person who owns the house in that constituency. That's not an issue.
You're not obligated to. I mean, at the end of the day, have you got access to a residential home in your constituency so that you can spend an appropriate amount of time there looking after the constituents? Nigel has. He's doing a brilliant job for this constituents, and that's one of the reasons why we're leading in the polls. People like what we're doing, whether it's on the small boats, disaster and catastrophe, whether it's on the brilliant conference we've just had, which is going to put all the other conferences to shame, whether it's the huge savings that we're identifying that I talked about in my speech on Saturday, whether it's on the wasteful spending by the Bank of England, the ludicrous spending, 30 billion quid on net stupid zero, the massive savings I've identified in the local government pension scheme, which is another massive scandal. I've identified between 8 and 11 billion quid of overcharging and underperformance in these pension schemes. That's a scandal that we should be talking about.
Do you think the King may have had cancer because he took a COVID vaccine?
I've no idea. I mean, that's a personal matter between the King and his medical team. And frankly, I'm not interested in discussing such a personal thing.
So at your conference on the platform, your health advisor, Dr.
He's not a health
advisor. He is. He's your health advisor.
Ed, get a grip. He's not a health advisor.
I thought he was. I thought he was advising.
We live in the world of free speech, and occasionally, do you know what you have at conferences? You've been to many conferences. Absolute rubbish.
So he's not advising the Reform Party on health policy.
And we never said he was.
But you had him on the platform.
Have you lost it? I mean,
I
believe he might help the American government. The joy of free speech is you can have fringe events and people speaking at conferences, talking about stuff, and you might disagree with lots of it. But that is literally the whole purpose of free speech, which is why Nigel was at Congress last week giving testimony about the power of free speech. We don't want comedians arrested by 5 armed officers because, frankly, we live in an authoritarian state where Keir Starmer decides what is acceptable or not acceptable.
The thing is, Richard Tice, you see, I have been listening very carefully to the interviews you've given over the last couple of years.
People learn lessons and make progress, and we discuss things. And you know at conferences, mad things get discussed on fringe events.
They
We've seen
do.
plenty of mad things at Labour conferences
On the
that you've
platform,
attended,
on the
Mr.
platform,
Balls.
on the platform.
Look, can I ask about Lucy Connelly? Because it's a highly controversial case, of course. Lucy Connelly, you described, or the Reform Party described, as Britain's favourite political prisoner. She is, of course, somebody who pled guilty to a charge
Due to bad advice that she received
of
from the legal system.
racial
She
hatred.
should never have pled guilty.
Racial hatred against asylum seekers, and served time in prison as a result.
Which she should not have done.
So, but that is our legal system, that she pled guilty and therefore
our current Prime
conviction was
Minister
automatic.
was the Director of Public Prosecutions who in 2013 said the guidance should be that someone who puts out an offensive tweet who then deletes it and shows remorse should not be prosecuted and not be jailed. But then he changed and became a sort of authoritarian individual stroke monster who essentially ordered the judiciary to impose the harshest sentence on these people. And that's what happened.
He told the judiciary what to do.
He stood up, the Prime Minister of this country, and said he wanted the harshest possible sentences. That's essentially what he did. And that's why those sentences were handed down. That's why
It's nothing to do with him.
That's why those people were advised to
nothing to
plead
do with
guilty,
him. He's the
plead
Prime
guilty
Minister.
when
He
they
has
shouldn't
no
have.
say about what judges said.
Why did Ricky Jones, who did something, I think, far more offensive, live on TV, he pled not guilty and he got off? That's the way our system works. That is it. But I think Lucy and others, they were wrongly advised on cases, their cases at the time. Lucy should have pled not guilty.
She didn't. She pled guilty.
Correct. And do you know what?
She served time as a result.
We're not all perfect. We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's the nature of life. And actually, I think we should accept that, and you learn from it. I saw Lucy in prison.
Is she going to work with Reform? Is you going to
I think
employ her in some
I spoke
capacity?
to her husband and Lucy yesterday. They're obviously enjoying freedom now, and they'll work all that out. But I think that in terms of lessons learned and the ability to apply that about the importance of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, if she wants to, she's got potentially a very good role to play.
Even if it's racist.
We all make mistakes, Ed, OK?
Her tweet says...
So are you essentially saying that if you make a mistake, you can never have any contribution to society ever again? You've made mistakes. You've said daft things. You're still making a contribution to society.
I do.
OK.
I do.
Richard Tice, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Good to see you.
That exchange is the whole argument in miniature. Ed's position, in the transcript, is basically you can't hide behind free speech if you actively give a stage to claims that could scare people away from vaccines and put children at risk. Tice's position, again according to what said, is letting people speak, even if it's absolute rubbish, is healthier than driving it underground, and the real scandal is suppression and policing of opinions. Fair enough, debate it. But notice what's actually being tested here, judgment. Because nobody is saying you can't argue policy. The point Ed is making is about choice and platform. You invited them, you elevated it, you stamped it with a bit of legitimacy. Tice's counter is that open argument disinfects bad ideas. That's a real philosophical clash, and I'll give him this, at least he's fighting for the principle of open discussion rather than pretending controversy doesn't exist. Where I'm skeptical, and you should be too, is when free speech becomes a magic shield that excuses every reckless decision, while the same people demand total perfection from their opponents. You don't get to run on we're the honest outsiders and then brush off legitimate questions with, wrong guy, mate. If you want to replace the system, you've got to be cleaner than the system. And that takes us to the final stretch of the transcript, where the conversation turns into the political prisoner claim and a specific case. This is where the rhetoric gets even hotter and where you need to separate what's confirmed from what's alleged. Listen to how he describes the legal advice, the plea, and the responsibility for what happened. You can hear how quickly this turns into a wider accusation that the British system punishes speech harshly, that politicians signal for the harshest outcomes, and that people end up making life-ruining decisions in court because of bad advice. Those are serious claims, and if you're a normal working person, you should care because the law is meant to be predictable and fair, not a weapon that swings harder depending on who you are and what you said. But here's the bottom line: whether you're Reform, Labour, Tory, or none of the above, trust is earned the same way. Tell the truth plainly. Don't wriggle when the numbers and the wording get awkward. And don't sell freedom as a brand if you can't pair it with responsibility in practice. Patriots on both sides of the Atlantic can smell a double standard a mile off, and they're not having it.